I finally had to just kind of jump, and I walked away from that city job, which is something no one does, and came to Sacramento. Started looking for a gig in Sacramento. Did about 6 month stint as a lighting guy for a lighting maintenance company. Horrible experience all around, but sometimes those just, help you build a callus over those spots that need more callus. Spent a lot of time, 14 to 16 feet up a ladder in grocery stores and banks while people were bumping into my ladder. Always working hot because the lights had to be on. Got zapped just dozens of times a day doing that. Way more than any other job I've ever had. Changing out ballasts in lamps in grocery stores and banks and businesses. Not a fun gig, but I'm glad I did it just to get it over with. Kind of like fast food. I think everyone should do it just to know what it's like. I did that stint too. But so when I started looking for better and better jobs, I found an ad in the paper for an electrician. Called about it. I didn't know anything except they were looking for an electrician, so I didn't know whether I would qualify or what. Didn't know anything about the company at the time. I had done a little bit of gig work in LA for friends' bands, doing, one-off nightclub level roadie work. So I knew a little bit, but very little bit. So when I applied for this job, it was for the head of department in the trade show department, doing temporary power for trade shows. And when I said power distribution, their eyes lit up and they had that whole old look on their face, like that was exactly the lingo that they were looking for. We did not mean the same things. When I was talking about power distribution, I was talking about permanent installation of utility level power systems. But it was the words they wanted to hear. A lot of times that's all it takes to get the foot in the door. I understood three-phase power from working utility work, and they were enthralled with the idea of somebody who had any grip at all on that level of power technology, which is pretty basic stuff, but it's not stuff that people use on a day-to-day basis in the real normal world. Power distribution stuff, it's very common to be three-phase. A whole nother, we can have that talk some other time if anybody wants to learn about it. It doesn't pertain to real life, it does pertain to theater and showbiz power, because almost all the big, I would say professional, non-small commercial, non-small community level theaters are going to have three-phase power, and all the big touring stuff is going to be set up for three-phase. Nightclubs, bars, little places, 100-seat and less houses might not have that yet. But for the big stuff, the old Arco had 16,000 amps available of three-phase at 208 volts. And I've come close to maxing that out on a number of shows. Doing trade shows there, not a place to do trade shows. The community center, which right now is just the Memorial Auditorium, and right now it's not even that, but the convention center there has something like 300, 100 amp three-phase outlets available with the new hall coming in. It's a day-to-day thing. You use it all the time in that industry, but it's definitely on the tech side of things. But I knew a little bit about that, and they were looking for somebody who knew a little bit about that, and I got that job. I worked there for about 4 years as their head of department in the trade show power section. So we were powering booths, everything from a little 500 watt something to play a laptop on during a trade show, all the way up to great big computer shows with hundreds of amps per booth in some of those booths, and all custom installation. Did all the trade shows and consumer shows that have come through Northern California. Stockton, Sacramento, all over the place up here. When I hired on, the biggest show going was the, what was it called? It was Government Technologies Conference, which was the West Coast trade show for all government entities west of the Mississippi to buy their technology. Huge, neat show, lots of neat computer gizmos and gadgets. And all of that was a real learning experience and a puzzle to power all that stuff. You had to learn to really roll with it and make it so that it would work and get them through that 3-day show. A little bit different philosophy than the utility work, which had to last for 40 years. But they lend each other skills. More people stuff in the trade show industry. You had to deal with all of those personalities who were under stress of getting their set up and done and trying to sell product, and you were kind of the extra, hassle of that. So that was an interesting background to the power aspect of things and dealing with people under production stress. I did that for 4 years, and during that time, the company that I worked for would do all of their overhire out of Local 50 IATSE Stagehands Union Hall. So the people I worked with on a day-to-day basis, we had a cadre of people who worked for the company, but on a show there might be 50 people working there, and 10 of them were company people, and 40 of them were stagehands that we hired out of the hall. So I got to work with those people a lot doing that, and really impressively neat bunch of people. I knew that's the direction I wanted to go. There was no way for me to get there between the rules of the company and the rules of the union. They were set up as sort of a gatekeeper system. You had to get hours to get into the union. You had to get hours in both trade show and theatrical. In the company, they kept their trade show people pretty separate from theatrical, so you couldn't get those hours to get both to get in. And I don't think it was a mistake at all. I think it was absolutely on purpose. STL is already a training ground for people. There are people all over the world who have STL on their resume, even though it's a little Sacramento podink kind of company. They have a really good rep for training people to be able to deal with things. Part of that is the philosophy of the company, which is kind of trial by fire to begin with, but it does make for people who can do things. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere kind of company. And that's changed a lot also over the last few years. They're getting ready to retire, I'm pretty sure. They've lost a lot of their backdoor contract work. They historically have been, they've owned a lot of agreements with manufacturers for some really high-end lighting and theater equipment, and they've been losing that stuff just to the internet and to the way the economy's been. Anyhow, so I worked for them for a long time. At the end of about 4 years, the union got tired of them not coming to the STL not coming to the table to discuss a new contract, and sent the company a letter saying that the union was no longer going to recognize the negotiated out-of-date contract numbers, and that STL could still hire them gladly at the same rate as any other company coming in who had no relationship with the union. STL took that as a strike, and that was a real stressful moment for me. We spent a good amount of time trying to figure out how that was going to work. And it got worked out for about 6 months. They came to the table and talked a little bit, but after 6 months, they stopped doing that and it all fell apart. And Local 50 struck STL. At which point, I honored their strike. I was one of 2 employees who honored the strike, and I was let go. The best way to get fired, in my book. I haven't had a lot of experience getting fired other ways, but I can't imagine a better one. The day after that, I was working Reba out of the hall at ARCO. And I really haven't looked back very much. It was a tremendously good experience to do that. I learned that, you can stand up to the man, basically. If you're in the right, it'll work out. Like I said, the next day I was working Reba. Reba, like so much rock and roll, which is one of the prime things that IATSE does, especially here in SAC. A show like Reba comes in and she might have anywhere from a dozen to 2 dozen big rig trucks that pull in, and a regular day at the arena is basically you show up at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning, and you show up early, because 5 minutes early is 10 minutes late in this business. And that's really an issue. You don't get very many second chances on that. We're integral tools to getting the job done, but we're very small tools in the big scheme of things, and we can be easily enough replaced with other small tools. So yeah, you don't get to have the ego of saying, that you can come in whenever you want. Yeah, you have to be there ready to go, but they do rely on you, and that's why. So Reba pulls in with anywhere from a dozen to 2 dozen trucks. I think that year she was traveling with about 18, so right in the middle of her level of production. So that's 18 big rig trucks full of her gear, or the gear that her production team is leasing for that tour. The first truck that comes in has all the chain motors for the rigging. That ended up being my go-to department for the last, for 18 or so of the last 20 years. But you don't start there. You start with push. Everybody pretty much starts as push, which is literally go to the truck, get the box, walk the box out to the stage, and one of the roadies will tell you where to put it. Go back and get another box. And this goes on the whole day, basically, right up until just before sound check. There are people doing push. So it starts off with chain motors and steel, the first thing to come off the first truck, because those are the things that have to go up first so the next stuff can come in under it. These are, a show like Reba, she probably has, anywhere from 120 to 180 one-ton chain motors. These things weigh about 85 pounds for the chain, or for the motor, and another 85 to 100 pounds for the chain that's on it. You lay those out, and there's a team of a roadie or two who travels with the show and knows, it's kind of hard to explain, they know in space where their motors have to hang. And there's not much leeway most of the time. Each one is a little bit different, but generally speaking, they have to hang where they have to hang. And those roadies don't know our houses. They just know their set and how it has to be. So they mark where their motors are going to have to hang on the floor with one of our head riggers. They walk around and they write these archaic hieroglyphs on the floor that the ground riggers come and know what it means and what to build. That's where I went into that business, is doing ground rigging. You come in and you have to build these steel slings and shackles and know all this, the tricky, weird triangulation math to be able to get those motors to hang exactly where they need to hang in space relative to where the house's beams are. So it's an interesting puzzle, kind of like the power thing for the trade shows. It's something to keep your mind occupied and give you a bit of a challenge. Sometimes it's pretty darn stressful. You got these guys people who are 85 feet above you, dropping ropes in, and they can't see what you see, and you can't see what they see, and neither of you can see what the roadie needs, what it's going to be in the end. The roadie's got this picture of exactly where that motor's going to hang in 3 or 4 hours, and they know what's going to go under it. We don't have that information available to us yet. It's a neat teamwork, kind of faith in the professionalism of the people around you experience. It's a trip. So we build all that. The riggers drop their ropes in. We carefully tie the ropes on. They pull up the chains. They make the points. Then once a number of the points are made, some of the electrical team has been flaking out cables, and they power the motors. They run the motors up to about working height, which is about chest high. Then the carpenter team that's been pulling stuff off the trucks, the truss and stuff is now off the trucks. They roll those trusses out under those motors and attach the trusses to the motors. By this time, we're working on the next set of motors, and the electricians are flaking out power for the next set of motors, and it's this constant follow leader kind of teamwork thing going on from then on. So we hang the motors. The carpenters bring the trusses under the motors and hook them up. The electricians bring the power.
Uh-oh. I was so into it, man. Hopefully he'll be back. He'll be back.
I'm so confused.
Are you back, Michael?
What? How long was I gone?
5 seconds.
Okay. So to start over at the beginning?
No.
So are you getting a picture of how this teamwork thing works? How you've got these separate departments who are relying on each other to get their own thing done, and then the next thing has to fit in under it logistically. So eventually, all these steps go on. Eventually, all this truss has all the lighting and sound gear hanging on the trusses, and they raise them up to trim. Oh, who's that? That's scary. After that's all up, then they roll the stage that carpenters have been building downstage. They roll it all the way up under this rig and start doing the scenic stuff on stage, while some of the riggers are up on the trusses. They've climbed up onto the truss, and they're focusing the lights that the electricians hung 2 or 3 hours ago. So it's a constant near panic teamwork rotation business. Really, it's a blast to be involved in that. And rock and roll has a different stress level than theater in that. We do both in Sacramento. Some cities that have bigger draws have separate unions for each of those, I don't know what you can call those, different facets of show business. But Sacramento, we do everything. We do trade shows, we do theater, we do rock and roll. We even do movies from time to time. Lots of corporate events, which are AV shows, which is each one of those is a little bit different. And you get to be, by the time you're a journeyman, you've done all of them, and you really know how to do pretty much, you're useful on any of them. You may not be head of department material in all of them, but you're usable in all those departments. I remember time where we got sent down to Stanford University. They had a new theater they were opening up, and we were going to do a show there. They had scheduled it poorly, and it was their install was happening during midterm test season. So what they normally would have all their students doing, their students were all busy that week and couldn't do it. So they called around, and the local in San Francisco was too busy to get them people. So once that happens, they can call Sacramento. So they called us, and about 6 of us went down, and it was going to be a 3-day install was what we were called for. And we went down there to the college, and the couple of little bobtail trucks, 28-foot, 30-foot bobtail trucks, backed up to the dock and offloaded the gear, and we put it all up, and we were looking around at each other. It was before lunch, but after break, and the house technical director was there, and he came over and he kind of said, that he was kind of didn't know how to deal with the situation because he thought we'd be there 3 days, and it's not quite lunch yet, and we're done. And we were all thinking there was a lot more stuff coming later, but he said, no, that's really all there is to it. Didn't expect you guys to get it done that quick. We work under a different set of speed expectations than college classes. We do different things. We're not building scenery, we're installing scenery. We're not designing any of it really, we're installing it. So it comes off the truck, and it better already be designed and ready and built. We put it together. So that's a different philosophy, different things you have to think about. It has to work by the time we get there. I mean, we can fix things, but it's not a design place so much as it is install it and get it in quick. And our whole lifestyle is kind of based on the rock and roll thing, where the trucks pull in at 7 or 8 in the morning, and the show has to be focused and sound checked well before 6 or 7 in the evening. And then the show goes on, and when the show's over, everything comes back down and goes back on those trucks and leaves that night. That's different than a 3 or 4 day install for a little, 1,200 seat theater that's got a little gig going on that they think is going to take 3 days to install. Different speed expectations, and it's neat. That was a neat one, one that set a sort of an interesting standard. I don't know.
Michael,
what?
When you say union, when you say the hall or IATSE or us, you're basically referring to the Stagehand Union, right?
Yes, International Association of Theatrical Stage Employees and Related Crafts of the U.S. and Canada. We're only international in U.S. and Canada, but that does mean international. We have hundreds of different locals across the countries. Ours is Local 50, IATSE, out of Sacramento, is considered a theatrical stagehands union. We work as a mixed union, but our actual paperwork says we're theater. There's mixed unions that do all the same things that we do, but it's complicated and internal politics about how they label those things. But in places like LA, you have all sorts of different little unions within that big IATSE union. You'll see our bug at the end of most TV shows and almost all movies. Looks kind of like a spider. I don't have, I might have one here close by somewhere. The union halls work, every union works a little differently. I have a bug here. This is our bug. You can see that? Does that show? Okay. That's the local 50 bug. If it says a number in the middle of it like that, it's that local. If it's the international, it'll say IA. So in LA, they have a union, a separate local union for cameramen. They have a separate local union for movie set decorators. They have a separate union for movie firefighters, specific to, they're under IA, and they are very specifically movie set firefighters. There's a lot of specialized equipment, technologies, and situations that only happen in movies that you need first responders who are trained specifically for that craft. And that's actually a thing that's in the IA. We get there. We have helicopter pilots in the IA because it takes special skills to run it, to fly a helicopter for movie shooting.
Thank you, babe.
It's really wild how wide ranging that union is. And it's all over. They're everything from trade shows and weddings to movie shoots.
I find this whole union career fascinating. I wish I had known about it when I was the age that my students are right now. How do you get into the union?
If you want to stay in Sacramento area, so our jurisdiction basically goes from the center of downtown Sacramento halfway to anyone else's center of their jurisdiction, any other union. So Local 16 in the Bay Area is our closest physically, and our union basically covers out to, I don't know, past Vacaville, but not like Fairfield. That's them. So if you want to stay in Sacramento, the way to do it is when you turn 18, if you want to get into this, you can call the union hall and tell them that you're interested and that you'd like to be put on their permit list. And you're welcome to contact me if you guys want to do this. It's not a job interview. They'll talk to you a little bit about things like what to wear and what to bring, but it's pretty minor. They kind of expect you to carry the ball about being a bit of a stagehand. They don't expect a lot at the beginning. You'll spend your first bunch of time pushing boxes from the truck to the stage, and no matter where you start. And working trade shows, you'll be kicking carpet and going and getting and putting up back wall and stuff. But you call the union hall and you tell them you're interested. They'll take your information down, and if you time it right, they'll call you back soon, usually for a rock and roll show or a big trade show. And we will talk about you afterwards. It's just, that's how it is. The membership gets to decide what happens with people who are coming in. If you have a negative impression on a bunch of people at a show, your number will get lost. The more often you can say yes to the dispatch, the more often the dispatch will call you. It's absolutely within her purview to go with the easiest people she knows who are going to work at that level. Once you're a journeyman and you've actually joined the union and gone through those hoops, you have separate rights above that. So in my position, I have a spot on the call list that doesn't change. And when an order comes in for 30 stagehands for a gig, it'll be broken down into departments. We need a head of department for 7 departments. And those are all specific. And we need somebody who can run a lighting board and somebody who can run a sound board, or we need 3 trained power distribution techs who can do trade show power. These things come in the notes, but basically beyond that, it goes right down the list. She calls or contacts you. We have a website now for all that. But you go right down the list. So I think I'm 76 on the list now. As people get old and retire, they fall off the top of the list. As new people come in and get their cards, they enter at the bottom of the list. But other than that, the list is a straight rotation. So every time it gets down to the 76 stagehand call, my name comes up each time. Other cities have different systems for that, but ours is a straight seniority list that way.
So does that mean that at this point, now that you are like fully in the union, your spot on the list doesn't change, so you're able to say no to a job sometimes?
Absolutely. With ours, I really like the way that Local 50s is set up. It works well for my attitude and my lifestyle, which has changed now. I've got another separate thing going on. But once you get in on a list like that, you have that spot no matter what. So you can turn it down. You can turn down every call for any number of times. I can literally go away for 10 years, come back and make one phone call, say, I want the next job that comes up. And the next time that a job comes up that gets down to my number on the list, I will get called. It's an amazing level of security in work. Most people don't have that kind of security at all these days.
Yeah.
Interesting, because I can't create work. So if there's, like right now, we have an absolutely unprecedented situation going on with this virus. Show business has stopped. There are movies being made, but there's hardly even TV being made. There's no live events going on, just none. In the country, there's none. All of the people who are touring are off work and gone home. All the trucks are parked. There's nothing. It's a trip. This doesn't happen. I mean, I've been doing this professionally for, I don't know, 25 years. And in that time, good times and bad times economically, we are surprisingly insulated from that, much more so than most industries. When times are good, everybody's out celebrating and they want to go see a show. And that's all the time when times are good. When times are bad, people will save their last buck to go see their favorite artist play. And it means that it doesn't matter what else is going on in the economy. Theater or showbiz tech work is always there. Good times, bad times. And Sacramento is a surprisingly good position for that. I remember after 9/11, the morning of 9/11, we were putting in a trade show. And when the news cracked, they stopped the installation of the trade show, and everybody stood around for 2 or 3 hours deciding what to do. And finally, the call came that show was going to be uninstalled or struck before it even started. Put it all back on the truck, spent the whole day working, putting it back on the trucks, and off it went. They canceled a bunch of shows because of that, but they also added a whole bunch of shows because of that. So I think the net work cost, we actually worked an equal amount of work for stagehands in Sacramento. Unlike the Bay Area, San Francisco, they're a international level city. We're a regional level city. So trade shows in particular that were going on in San Francisco, they canceled them. They didn't come back for a year. Sacramento, a lot of those shows, even the big shows that were national and international level shows, what they did is they broke up and became regional shows because people didn't want to fly, they wanted to drive. Sacramento got a bunch of shows that were sent from other cities. They broke up the show into a smaller regional show, and they had it in Sacramento. So even in something as impactful as that to the economy, it's still that blunt hit is moved around and levels out really interestingly within that industry. But the coronavirus has changed all that, and we'll see what comes out. It's coming back. People will still go see shows once this is worked out, lived through.
So along those lines, Michael, you work for the city of Sacramento as a stagehand, right?
Yeah.
And right now you're at home. What's happened with your job? How is that working for you?
A few years ago, I for 7 years, I waited for a position with Sacramento City. The city actually has a handful of stagehands that help run Memorial Auditorium, the Convention Center, and the theater. And I literally waited 7 years talking to the other stagehands about how when that job opens, I think I'd be a good mix for it. And I wanted it. Finally, it opened, and I got the job. And it's been 3.5 years or something, almost 4 years now, that I've been doing that. It lends a whole different weird set of things to the lifestyle. I have 40 hours a work week, 40 hours a week of work, which is unusual in stagehand land. A lot of weeks for working out of the hall, you might have, a couple of 80-hour weeks and then an 8-hour week. And it evens out. The pay over the year is pretty close to the same, I would say. And at my level, having been in 20 years, if I wanted to and was hungry and was working out of a union hall, I could probably do 75K a year, maybe 80K a year. And just being casual, I can still do probably close to 50K a year. With the city, it's a little bit less than that, but I have even a better benefit package. The union has a good benefit package, but the city has other benefits above and beyond. But with the city, right now, because of my situation, they're not working us, but they're still paying us. They sent me home. They have nothing for me to do at work, but because it's a city job, I'm getting paid out of an emergency payroll fund. It's different. Whereas most of the union stagehands at this point are on unemployment. A lot of the stagehands use unemployment as a buffer for slow seasons. Remember that money is our money. We earned it. We put it into those funds. It's not charity, and it's there to be accessed. Being in the union makes that so much easier and less heartbreaking. If you know anybody who's had to deal with unemployment, it tends to be pretty darn miserable. You usually have to go out and search for jobs, and people who are finding themselves in unemployment, it's usually not a good time to be searching for a job. If you're union recognized, if you're being dispatched out of the union hall, all you have to do is make contact with your dispatch on a regular basis to qualify for unemployment. You don't have to take calls. You can actually figure out how it's going to work for you on a week-to-week basis and decide whether you want to take those calls or not, depending on how it's going to affect your paycheck coming out of unemployment. It's a strange lifestyle, but it's a lot of fun, and you can pay your bills doing it. And you can absolutely make a career out of it. There's always more to learn. There's always more levels to rise to. I have, strangely enough, in my coming up through the apprenticeship program, the two people who bracket me on our call list for seniority, the one above me and the one below me, are both world-class upriggers. John Champ, who's above me, and Jesse Wynn, who's below me, are both regularly, constantly working international shows. They're both regulars on the U2 tour and the Rolling Stones tours. So at any given time, those two guys are almost always on the road somewhere. And the stories they have to tell are, it's amazing. I joke around that people ask, what's a stagehand? Because we're not something that people are conscious of on a day-to-day basis. We hide in the shadows. If you see us, something has gone terribly wrong. I tell them, that a stagehand is kind of a cross between a ninja and a pirate. We wear black all the time, and we'll pretty much do anything for a buck. City stagehands, of course, are another layer of weirdness on top of that. We're a cross between a pirate, a ninja, and a DMV worker. Because I tell people no a lot.
Michael,
no, you can't do that is a theme.
I want to give the students a chance to ask questions if they have any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Questions?
Michael, Noah, Thomas?
Mr. Turner.
Mr. Turner?
That is really
so. Okay, so I asked the question in the chat, but I asked it wrong. So, if you were to say yes to almost everything, to every opportunity you had for the union thing, how long does it take to actually get into the union, to get your foot in the door for the union?
It's set up to have a self-managed filter. You have to get your hours in a year. And I believe now the hours are 300 hours of trade show and 400 hours of theatrical in a 12-month running year. Doesn't have to be a calendar year, but it has to be 12 calendar months.
Is that info on their website?
It's either on the website or it's definitely spread around. It's easy enough to get. And you won't be in a position to decide that until you've tried. By all means, when you turn 18, unless you're already busy doing something else, definitely call the hall. If it's something you think you might be interested in, take some calls and see if you like the work, see if you like the people, and go in with a good attitude of trying to learn and paying attention. It can't hurt you, and it pays really well. I mean, for a gig like that's literally just a starting gig, I don't think we've got anything going. I don't think any of our contracts, we might have one or two contracts that's just under $20 an hour. But we have lots of contracts that are closer to $30 an hour. And that's out of the gate. You're getting paid that to walk to the truck and get a box and roll it to the stage.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Kicking carpet, right? It's not a bad gig. It really, and it goes up from there if you have more skills. If you can get into different departments and stuff, and you want to put out the hump to do it. But yeah, it's good pay. It's not super regular at that level, but the hourly is very good to start with, and the lifestyle around that level of pay, I think, is exceptional. And it takes, if things are flowing good, if the economy is good and there's lots of shows going on, because the more shows going on, the easier it is to get your hours, right? So in my case, because of how I came in, I was golden boy because I got fired from my last full-time gig for not crossing their picket line. So that was recognized. I mean, they certainly can't do anything official about it. They can't say that they could but a different situation. But basically, they christened me as Golden Boy and gave me all the work they could. And they can do that. They can say, as a permit worker, you have no place on the list. They can choose to work a permit worker however they choose to work a permit worker, including losing your number. They can call you. The rules are that they should call all of their journeymen before they call any of their apprentices. They should call all of their apprentices before they call any permit workers. But if you have special skills, all that's off. If you like in my case, I came in with a head of department level skill set in trade shows and specifically trade show power. So whenever they needed a trade show electrician, I was one of the first people they called for that, even though I wasn't even an apprentice yet. And they can do that. It's within the union's purview to control those things. So it's good to pick up more skills as quickly as you can.
So by
and
skills,
kinda
you
hustle.
mean things like, by skills, you mean things like woodworking, welding, any kind of electrical work, almost
Oh, wow.
kind of any kind of manual work?
Well, all of that,
soak it up.
but specifically to the work that they're doing. So while welding would be a nice skill to have and has benefit, I can't tell you how many times things have come in on trucks that were broken and somebody said, hey, I can weld that for you. And it's not a matter of like right now, it's a matter of tonight you make an extra $500 because you can take that thing in your pickup truck back to your house and weld it up and bring it back tomorrow morning. And they don't have to research a local welder to come out and do it. And they'll pay you a good chunk of change for that. But we don't weld on the job. We do some basic carpentry on the job, basic mechanical skills, being able to twist a wrench and being, good with your hands and having a good spatial relationship is huge value in that industry, any part of the production side of things.
Wow.
But what I'm really talking about is if you can shine at something, and honestly, like most jobs, the biggest hurdle is personalities. If you can get along well and work with a lot of people who have different attitudes, and you can still be, I'm here to work, that'll get you a long, long ways. But if it's noticeable that you have things like good judgment on awareness, it's kind of hard to put your finger on. So I'm thinking for the things that I've done personally, ground rigging has been a huge benefit to my career. It fits what I want to do, my attitude towards things. We're first in, we hit it hard, we get it done quick, and we're out first. So ground rigging on an install like that, I work 2 hours and I'm done for the morning. I come back at night and work 2 hours and I'm done for the night. And in those 4 hours or 5 hours worth of work, I'll make, $350 or something that day. That's my kind of day. In the middle of the day, I get to go have a nice lunch, go shopping, go see a movie, go to the junkyards to go find Jeep parts, kick around, visit some friends. And then have dinner and then come back to work and take it all out and still get paid a good pay for that day. I like that. But the thing the reason that I was offered that training, and it's all on-the-job training, so much of it is on-the-job training. The reason I was offered that training is literally some people came up and said, we know how you are and how you act and what how you are at work, and would you be interested in learning this skill because it looks like you'd be a good fit. Being able to control the space around you in a safe way is huge in this because we're all moving fast and we have to be aware of each other, even though we're not all working together always because there are so many different departments going on at one time. But in particular for ground rigging, there's a lot of situational awareness that has to happen. And they asked me, they said, we thought you would be a good fit for this because of situational awareness, being, the eyes in the back of your head, weird little tool sets like that. Mm-hmm. It's hard to put your finger really to be able to define what those tools all are, but things like that. Pretty soon of doing it, it took me, it took me 4 years to get my card, and I was relatively fast-tracked. So generally it takes 2 or 3 years to get your hours, and then 2 years or so to get through the apprenticeship program. You can do it in a little bit less than that if things are moving along quickly, but the whole time you're still working. It's not like you have to go study for 4 years and pay someone else for that study. You're working all the time, and you're getting paid well for it. It's not always the most fun, and they're going to put you wherever they need you. But once you get there, that card is an amazing treasure in my mind. Even though I don't use it right now, I'm working for the city, and I plan on working for the city till I retire from the city. But I'm not giving that card up, because if nothing else, I can always, literally on a whim, I can walk away and make a phone call and be working the next show.
Right.
As long as I pay my stamps every year, which is something like $300 a year. So one day's gig will pay for my stamps for the year. That's membership to the International. It's a strange level of security that most people don't have these days.
Yeah, no kidding. Michael, I've recorded most of this session with you because I know a lot of the tech students couldn't make it today because this is like our first tech session in our new online classroom. But I think it might be cool if we, later in May, maybe we could have you back again. Would you be willing to come back? That way people can watch this and maybe ask some questions. Does anybody have any questions? Mr. Turner, did you want to say anything?
I'm so proud of my kids. Doing something that he enjoys and very articulate and sharing.
I'm getting about half of that.
Yeah, I got about half of it. I think he said he enjoyed listening.
Good.
I'm so happy for him.
And,
thank you.
Yeah.
I am too. I'm jealous of me.
I am jealous of you too.
I like teaching, but I think that would be a fun thing to do.
Yeah. Well, whenever you want.
Thanks for sharing. No, I would not be good at any of those things, but it sounds like so much fun.
And I missed a lot of the things that go on. There's so many things. It's not all physical, go to the truck, get the box stuff. A lot of it does take strength, but a lot of it doesn't. And even the things that are heavy and hard to maneuver, and there are a lot of big things that need to be moved around, even those things, there's always plenty of hands to help.
Yeah.
A lot of it is nuanced also. Running follow spot for a Broadway production, your hand-eye coordination has to be, extraordinary to be able to do that and never have anybody think about it. One of the nicest compliments that I ever got running a follow spot was, "Wow, you're like a machine." And it's like, yes, that's what I want. I want to be confused with a very well-programmed moving light. Mm-hmm. That means everything was perfect. Running camera, I've done 12 years of camera work, live sports camera. We do that stuff. I haven't done a Super Bowl, but that's one of my bucket list things, is to be a camera guy on a Super Bowl. I'm not a big football fan, but that would be really cool. And those guys are in my union, Yeah, it's a trip, and there's so many levels and layers and other things. I have a friend who's I don't know if I mentioned, but I did talk to her about it.